Armin was known across the city as one of the youngest billionaires. He had built his empire through hard work and clever ideas, but people often whispered that his heart was cold. He rarely smiled, and his decisions were always practical, never emotional. To him, life was about success, status, and wealth. At home, however, there was only one person who could soften his heart: his mother, Mrs. Sophia. She had been struggling with poor health for years. Her illness was not sudden, it was slow and tiring, the kind that required constant care. Doctors visited often, but it was her quiet strength that kept her alive. Armin had recently announced his engagement to Zara, the daughter of another rich family. The wedding was not based on love but on status and business connections. Everyone around him celebrated the match, saying it would make his empire even stronger. Zara was beautiful, confident, and used to a life of luxury. But she rarely paid attention to Mrs. Sophia. To her, the sick woman was just a shadow in the house, not someone worth noticing. In contrast, there was someone else in the mansion who noticed every sigh and every weak breath of Mrs. Sophia. Her name was Miriam, a maid who had joined the house only a year ago. She was quiet, hard-working, and respectful. People often ignored her because of her simple clothes and the color of her skin, but she never complained. She came from a small town, and all she wanted was honest work to support her younger siblings. One evening, Mrs. Sophia's condition suddenly worsened. Her breathing grew heavy, and she clutched her chest in pain. Most of the staff panicked, running around helplessly. Zara, who was visiting at the time, quickly excused herself, saying she couldn't watch something so depressing. But Miriam did not move away. Instead, she rushed to the bedside and held Mrs. Sophia's hand with firm courage. "Stay with me, madam. Don't close your eyes." "I am here," Miriam whispered, her voice shaking but strong enough to comfort. Mrs. Sophia looked at her weakly, but in that moment, her eyes softened. She felt a warmth that even her own son, busy with his empire, sometimes forgot to give. Miriam quickly called for water, adjusted the pillows, and kept speaking gentle words to calm her. When the doctor finally arrived, he was surprised to see the maid taking charge with such care. "She did the right thing," he said to Armin, who had just entered the room. "If she hadn't been here, the attack might have been worse." Armin stood still, his eyes fixed on the scene. His mother's frail hand was still in Miriam's, and the maid was not letting go. He saw something he had never noticed before: the deep concern in Miriam's face, the way she treated his mother as more than just an employer. Later that night, when Mrs. Sophia was resting peacefully, Armin found himself standing at the doorway, watching Miriam quietly fold the blanket at the edge of the bed. She did not see him, but he studied her every movement. There was no show, no desire for attention. Her care was real, born from a heart that expected nothing in return. He thought about Zara, who had walked away without a word. She never once came back to check if his mother was fine. The difference between the two women struck him deeply. In the silence of the night, Mrs. Sophia opened her eyes slightly and saw her son watching. With a weak smile, she whispered, "Not everyone who shines is gold, Armin. Sometimes, the brightest heart is hidden in the simplest person." Those words stayed with him long after he left the room. For the first time in years, Armin felt his heart heavy with confusion. His world of wealth and business suddenly seemed small compared to the simple act of kindness he had just witnessed. He didn't say anything to Miriam that night, but as he lay in his bed, one thought kept repeating in his mind: why would a maid, with no ties to us, risk so much care for my mother, while the woman I plan to marry could not even stay for a few minutes. It was a question that began to shake the very foundation of his decision. The next morning, the mansion was quiet. Mrs. Sophia rested peacefully after the sudden attack, but her body was still weak. Miriam had stayed awake most of the night, checking her breathing and adjusting the blanket whenever it slipped. She did not think of herself, only of the fragile woman who had grown dear to her heart. When Armin entered his mother's room, he found Miriam sitting by the window with a bowl of warm soup. She was carefully blowing on the spoon before bringing it to Mrs. Sophia's lips. The care was so gentle, almost like a daughter tending to her mother. "Good morning," Armin said softly, his usual commanding voice replaced by a tone of respect. Miriam quickly stood, lowering her eyes. "Good morning, sir. Madam is better today. The doctor said she should eat light meals." Armin nodded but said nothing more. He walked closer to the bed, touched his mother's forehead, and felt relief when he noticed her temperature had gone down. Mrs. Sophia gave him a faint smile, but then her eyes shifted to Miriam. "She has been by my side all night," she whispered. "You should thank her." Armin turned to the maid. The billionaire who rarely expressed emotions found himself struggling for words. "Thank you," he said finally. Miriam bowed her head. "It is my duty, sir." But deep inside, Armin knew it was not duty, it was something more. Most servants only did what was required, never beyond. Miriam's heart, however, seemed to guide her beyond rules and duties. Later that day, Zara came to the mansion dressed in expensive clothes, carrying shopping bags. She entered the room with a cheerful laugh. "Armin, you won't believe the new jewelry I found." "Perfect for the wedding day," she said, not even glancing at the sick woman in bed. Armin's jaw tightened. He remained silent, but inside, his disappointment grew. Miriam, who was arranging medicine on the table, quietly stepped aside, observing the sharp contrast between Zara's excitement and Mrs. Sophia's pale face. "Mother is still weak," Armin finally said in a firm voice. "This is not the time to talk about jewelry." Zara blinked, surprised by his tone. She forced a small smile. "Of course, but we can't ignore preparations either. The wedding is only a month away." Mrs. Sophia closed her eyes as if the noise drained her strength. Miriam noticed and gently covered her ears with the blanket, whispering, "Rest, madam." Armin watched the scene quietly, his heart unsettled. He could not ignore how his mother leaned more towards the comfort of a maid than her own future daughter-in-law. That night, while sitting by his office window, Armin remembered his mother's words, "Not everyone who shines is gold." He thought about his empire, his image, his planned marriage, all built on appearances. But what about his mother's happiness? What about the warmth she needed in her final years? He realized that his mother had been silently wishing for something all along, not diamonds, not big houses, not powerful connections. She only wished for love and care, something Zara never offered. In the following days, Miriam continued to watch over Mrs. Sophia. She read to her from old storybooks, sang soft lullabies from her village, and even made herbal drinks she had learned from her grandmother. Every time, Mrs. Sophia's face brightened. One afternoon, as the sun streamed into the room, Mrs. Sophia spoke in a weak but clear voice. "Miriam, you remind me of my younger self. When I was your age, I didn't have riches, but I had love to give. And sometimes, love is what keeps people alive." Miriam's eyes softened. "Madam, you are like family to me. I cannot see you suffer." Armin, standing silently at the door, felt a wave of emotions rise in him. He had seen countless deals, signed contracts worth millions, and attended the grandest parties. But none of those things had ever made him feel what he felt in that moment: a deep, quiet respect for a woman who had nothing yet gave everything. That evening, Zara once again came to the house. She barely spent 5 minutes in Mrs. Sophia's room before complaining about the dull atmosphere. Instead, she asked Armin to accompany her to a fashion event. Armin looked at his mother, frail and resting, then at Miriam, who was adjusting the pillows with care. For the first time, he refused Zara openly. "No, I'm staying with my mother tonight." Zara frowned. "But Armin," he cut her off. "This is not up for discussion." Zara stormed out, her heels echoing through the hallways. Mrs. Sophia, half awake, opened her eyes and whispered to her son, "My heart knows what it wants for you, Armin. But I fear you are blind to it." Armin sat beside her, troubled. He took her hand gently and asked, "What do you mean, mother?" She only smiled faintly, looking towards Miriam, who was quietly leaving the room. "One day, you will understand." Those words echoed in his mind all night. He lay awake, torn between duty and truth, wealth and love, appearance and reality. For the first time, the strong billionaire felt lost, unsure of the path ahead. But deep down, his heart already knew the answer. The days moved slowly, but for Armin they felt heavier than ever. He managed his empire as usual, holding meetings and signing deals, but his thoughts often wandered back to his home. Each time, he pictured his mother's fragile smile and Miriam's patient care. In the mansion, Miriam's presence had quietly become essential. She was not just a maid anymore, she was the gentle light in Mrs. Sophia's weekdays. Whenever the older woman coughed, Miriam was the first to offer water. Whenever she felt cold, Miriam wrapped her in warm shawls. There was no demand for praise, only a silent devotion that spoke louder than words. One morning, Armin returned home earlier than expected and found Miriam reading aloud from an old book while Mrs. Sophia listened with her eyes closed. The room smelled of fresh herbs, and sunlight filled the curtains. For a brief moment, the scene touched him more deeply than any luxury he had ever bought. "Good morning," he said softly. Miriam quickly stood, adjusting her scarf. "Good morning, sir." Mrs. Sophia smiled weakly. "Armin, she reads to me like you used to when you were a boy." Armin's heart tightened. He remembered those days, sitting by his mother's bed with storybooks in hand, long before business and wealth stole his time. He glanced at Miriam and saw in her the reflection of something he had lost: simplicity, warmth, and real care. Later that evening, Zara came to the mansion again. Her eyes scanned the room and quickly fell on Miriam, who was folding laundry near the corner. Zara's expression hardened. "Why is she always here?" Zara asked with clear irritation. "Surely the nurses or staff can take care of your mother. Isn't this unnecessary?" Armin frowned. "She has been a great help. Mother feels comfortable with her." Zara laughed sharply. "Armin, she's just a maid. Don't give her so much importance." Those words struck him like a stone. Just a maid? He thought about the night Miriam had saved his mother, the nights she stayed awake, the care she gave without asking for anything. Was that just anything? He kept quiet, but his silence was heavy. Zara, used to his agreement, noticed the change. Her eyes narrowed as if she sensed a threat. That night, Mrs. Sophia spoke again, her voice weak but steady. "Armin, my son, wealth can bring many things, but it cannot buy a heart. A true heart gives without asking. You must decide wisely whom you allow near yours. Armin sat beside her, torn. Mother, my wedding is already announced. Breaking it would cause a storm. Mrs. Sophia squeezed his hand lightly. Storms come and go, but the wrong choice stays like a shadow. Her words settled into his soul. Over the next week, Zara grew more restless. She complained about the gloomy atmosphere in the mansion and pressed Armin to finalize wedding details. We need to book the grand hall, send invitations, and confirm the guest list, she insisted during dinner one evening. Armin nodded slowly but offered no real enthusiasm. His mind was far from wedding halls and guest lists. He noticed Miriam quietly serving food to his mother, her steps light, her face calm, her presence steady like the ground beneath his feet. Later, when Zara left for another shopping trip, Armin walked into his mother's room again. Miriam was adjusting the curtains to let in the moonlight. He paused at the doorway, then asked softly, "Miriam, why do you do all this? You hardly rest." She turned to him, surprised by his question. "Because she needs me, sir. My mother passed away when I was young. I couldn't do much for her, but caring for Madam feels like caring for my own mother." Her voice trembled, and for a moment, Armin saw the hidden pain behind her strength. It was not duty that moved her, but love born of loss. He could not find words to reply. All he could do was nod, his heart heavier than before. The following day, Mrs. Sophia's condition suddenly worsened again. This time, she fainted while trying to walk a few steps. Miriam screamed for help, holding her carefully to the ground. Doctors rushed in, and Armin's heart raced with fear. Zara, who had been on a call, appeared annoyed more than worried. "Again? This is so stressful," she muttered, stepping aside so her dress wouldn't touch the floor. Armin's eyes burned with anger. He watched Miriam press a cloth to his mother's forehead, whispering prayers with tears in her eyes, while Zara stood like an impatient guest. In that moment, the cracks in his engagement widened into a clear break inside his heart. That night, while sitting in his office, he stared at the engagement ring resting on his desk. His mind replayed everything: Zara's indifference, Miriam's devotion, his mother's words. For the first time, he admitted to himself, this wedding was not right. The silence of the room was broken only by his whispered decision. "I cannot marry her." The next morning began with heavy clouds in the sky, as if nature itself sensed the storm that was about to unfold inside the mansion. Armin woke early, his thoughts restless. The engagement ring lay untouched on his desk, and the decision he had whispered the night before still echoed in his heart: "I cannot marry her." He knew it would not be easy. Breaking an engagement between two wealthy families was not just a personal matter, it was a business scandal waiting to happen. But his mother's frail smile, Miriam's tears when she saved her again, and Zara's cold indifference gave him strength. When he entered his mother's room, Miriam was already there, arranging flowers by the window. The scent of fresh roses filled the space, softening the atmosphere. Mrs. Sophia lay in bed, her eyes weak but shining when she saw her son. "You look troubled," she said gently. Armin sat beside her, holding her hand. "Mother, I have made a decision. I cannot go forward with the wedding." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "At last, you listen to your heart." Miriam froze where she stood. She had not meant to overhear, but the words struck her deeply. She quickly lowered her head, pretending to focus on the vase. Her heart raced with confusion. What did this mean for the house, for Madame, for herself? Later that day, Armin called Zara to the mansion. She arrived dressed in glittering clothes, carrying shopping bags full of designer dresses. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were sharp with curiosity. "Armin, I bought 2 gowns for the wedding," she said excitedly. "You should see them. One has diamonds on the sleeves, perfect for me." Armin remained standing, his face calm but firm. "Zara, we need to talk." She stopped mid-sentence, her smile fading. "Talk? About what?" "The wedding. It cannot continue." His words were steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Zara burst into laughter, thinking it was a joke. "Armin, don't be silly. The invitations are almost ready." "I'm not joking," he said quietly. "I cannot marry you." Her laughter died instantly, replaced by shock. "What did you just say?" "I cannot marry you," he repeated, his voice stronger this time. "This engagement was built on business, not love. And after what I have seen, I cannot ignore the truth anymore." Zara's face burned with anger. "Is this about her?" she spat, pointing towards the hallway where Miriam had just passed with a tray. Armin's jaw tightened. "This is about my mother, about her happiness, and about mine. You don't care for her, Zara. You never tried. And I cannot marry someone who turns away from the person who means the most to me." Zara's hands trembled as she dropped her shopping bags. "Do you realize what you're doing? Do you realize how people will talk? You'll ruin your reputation, your alliances, everything." Armin met her gaze calmly. "Let them talk. I would rather lose the world than lose myself." Zara's eyes filled with fury. "You will regret this, Armin." She stormed out of the mansion, her heels striking the floor like thunder, leaving behind the echo of broken promises. The house fell silent after her departure. The staff exchanged nervous glances, whispering about what they had just heard. But Miriam, who had stood quietly at the edge of the hall, felt a storm inside her chest. She did not know why her heart beat so fast or why her eyes watered. She only knew that the mansion no longer felt the same. That evening, Armin sat by his mother's side once again. She looked at him with pride. "You did the right thing, my son. Not for me, but for yourself. A marriage without love is a cage." He sighed. "But people will blame me. They will say I disrespected Zara's family." Mrs. Sophia pressed his hand. "Let them say what they will. What matters is that you respected your heart. And someday, someone will respect you for it." As night fell, Miriam brought tea into the room. Her eyes avoided Armin's, but he noticed the slight trembling of her hands. When she placed the cup on the table, he finally spoke. "Miriam," he said softly, "I know this must have surprised you too. But I could not let my mother live her last years surrounded by coldness. She deserves warmth." Miriam lowered her gaze, her voice quiet. "Madam deserves the world. I only do what I can." Armin studied her for a long moment. There was no pride in her words, no hidden motive, only sincerity. And that sincerity was what made his heart restless. That night, as the clouds outside cleared and the moon shone through the windows, Armin stood by his office window once again. The city lights stretched endlessly before him, but his mind was not on business or wealth. For the first time in years, he felt free but also uncertain. He had broken the engagement, but what lay ahead was still unknown. Yet deep inside, a quiet voice told him that the path he had chosen was right. Because this time, It was not about money or status. It was about truth. News spread quickly, faster than Armin could have imagined. By the next morning, newspapers carried bold headlines: "Billionaire cancels wedding with Zara Malik." Reporters camped outside the mansion gates, waiting for a statement. Cameras flashed, and microphones reached forward each time Armin's car pulled in. Questions filled the air: why did you call off the wedding? Was it because of another woman? What will this mean for your empire? Armin ignored them all, walking past with calm silence. But inside, the weight of whispers pressed heavily on him. He knew the world would not stop talking, yet he stood firm in his decision. Inside the mansion, life felt different. Mrs. Sophia looked at her son with quiet pride, though her health continued to weaken. The storm outside had not touched her spirit. For her, what mattered was that Armin had chosen honesty over image. Miriam, however, was not at peace. The staff had started to whisper about her too. It must be because of her, some said when they thought she couldn't hear. Why else would a man like him break an engagement? Others glanced at her with suspicion, their eyes sharp and unkind. Miriam tried to ignore it, focusing only on Mrs. Sophia's care. But the words pierced her heart like tiny thorns. She never wanted attention. She only wanted to serve quietly, yet now she felt the heavy burden of being noticed for the wrong reasons. One afternoon, while she was preparing soup in the kitchen, two maids whispered behind her. "Have you seen how he looks at her? It's clear." "Yes," the other replied, "but she's just a maid. She doesn't belong in his world." Miriam's hands trembled as she stirred the pot. She wished she could cover her ears. She wished people could see that her only concern was Madame Sophia's health, nothing else. That evening, as she brought food to the bedroom, Armin noticed the sadness in her eyes. "Miriam, is something wrong?" he asked gently. She shook her head quickly. "Nothing, sir. I am fine." But her voice lacked its usual steadiness. Armin didn't press further, but his heart grew heavy. He could see how the whispers of others had begun to wound her, and he hated that his decision had dragged her into the storm. Meanwhile, Zara's family was furious. Her father sent messages filled with anger, threatening to ruin Armin's reputation in business circles. "You humiliated my daughter," one message read. "This insult will not be forgotten." Armin read the words calmly, then deleted them. He had expected this. Losing business deals mattered less to him than losing his peace. Days passed, and the pressure only grew. Armin's board of directors questioned his judgment. Friends avoided him at social gatherings. Yet through it all, he noticed one thing: Miriam still cared for his mother with the same devotion, even when whispers surrounded her. One night, Mrs. Sophia called her son closer. Her voice was weak, almost a whisper. "Armin, storms will always come, but I have seen how Miriam's care has kept me alive. Don't let the world's noise blind you to the truth." Armin held her hand tightly. "I know, mother. But I fear the world's eyes on her. She does not deserve this pain." Mrs. Sophia smiled faintly. "Sometimes, love is tested by fire. Those who are pure will shine brighter." Her words stayed in his heart long after she fell asleep. The next day, the whispers grew louder when Zara herself appeared at the mansion. Her face was sharp with anger, her voice filled with poison. "You ruined everything," she hissed at Armin. "But the world will know the truth. They will say you threw me aside for a maid. That will be your shame forever." Miriam, who was carrying a tray nearby, froze at the words. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, but she stayed silent, lowering her eyes. Armin's voice was firm. Enough, Zara. Leave this house and never come back. Zara laughed bitterly. You think you can escape this scandal? Watch, Armin. I will make sure her name is dragged through the mud. With that, she stormed out once more, leaving behind an even darker shadow. That night, Miriam sat alone in her small room, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She whispered to herself, I never wanted this. I only wanted to serve Madame with honesty. Her heart felt heavy with fear. What if the rumors grew bigger? What if her presence truly harmed the family she respected so deeply? But as the tears fell, a gentle knock came at her door. When she opened it, Armin stood there, his expression calm but his eyes soft. I know what people are saying, he said quietly. But you must understand something, this is not your fault. None of it. Miriam lowered her gaze. But sir, because of me, you face insults. Madam faces whispers. Armin shook his head. Because of you, my mother lives with comfort. Because of you, I saw the truth. I will never let anyone harm your name. For the first time, Miriam looked up, her eyes wet with tears. And in that moment, she saw not just a billionaire, but a son who carried the weight of love and responsibility, fighting for what was right. The days after Zara's last visit were heavy with tension. The mansion, once filled with quiet dignity, now carried an air of unease. Reporters still lingered outside the gates, their cameras ready to catch a glimpse of Armin or Miriam. The headlines twisted the truth each day, painting stories that were not real. Billionaire leaves bride for maid. Secret love story in the mansion. Armin read the articles with calm eyes, but deep inside, he burned with anger. He hated how the world loved lies more than truth. He hated how Miriam's name, pure and undeserving of insult, was dragged into the mud. Miriam herself carried the weight silently. She avoided the hallways whenever possible, working quietly in Mrs. Sophia's room or in the kitchen. The staff's whispers had not stopped, some pitied her, others judged her. Yet she never once spoke back. Her only focus remained Madame's comfort. One afternoon, while Miriam helped Mrs. Sophia drink her medicine, Armin entered. His face was tired, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. He sat near the bed and looked at his mother. They will not stop, he admitted softly. Every paper, every meeting, every whisper, everyone wants to talk about her. He glanced at Miriam. Miriam quickly lowered her head. Please, sir, don't think of me. I am used to hardship. People's words cannot break me. But Mrs. Sophia, though weak, spoke firmly. You should not have to be used to pain, child. Your kindness is being repaid with cruelty. That is not right. Armin's jaw tightened. Exactly. I cannot stay silent anymore. The next morning, he called a press conference. The media gathered eagerly, expecting more scandal, perhaps even an angry denial. But when Armin appeared, he stood tall, his voice calm and steady. I ended my engagement with Zara Malik because it was built on business, not love, he declared. My mother deserves to spend her days surrounded by care, not indifference. And as for Miriam, the maid in this house, let me make it clear, she is not the reason for the broken engagement. She is, however, the reason my mother is still alive today. Her devotion saved her more than once, and for that, I owe her respect, not shame. The reporters erupted with questions, but Armin lifted his hand and ended the meeting. His words traveled across the city like fire, shaking both admirers and critics. Some praised his honesty, while others called him reckless. But one thing was certain, he had defended Miriam openly. When he returned to the mansion, Miriam was waiting quietly by the doorway. Her eyes were filled with tears she could not hold back. "Why did you say that, sir?" she whispered. "Now the world will talk even more." Armin looked at her steadily. "Let them talk. I will not let them crush your name while you protect my mother with everything you have. You deserve honor, not insult." For the first time, Miriam could not reply. Her heart, usually calm, beat wildly in her chest. She turned away, trying to hide her tears. That night, Mrs. Sophia called both of them into her room. Her voice was weaker than ever, but her eyes held a quiet fire. "I may not have many days left," she said slowly, "but I want peace before I go. Armin, I have watched you grow into a man of strength, but strength means nothing without a heart. Miriam has shown me more love in 1 year than many show in a lifetime. Do not ignore what stands before you." Armin swallowed hard. "Mother," but she squeezed his hand gently. "You already know what I mean. I only want your happiness and hers." Miriam, sitting near the bedside, felt her cheeks burn. "Madam, please don't say such things. I am only a servant here." Mrs. Sophia shook her head faintly. "No, child. You are family in my heart." The room grew silent after her words. The ticking of the clock seemed louder than ever. Armin looked at Miriam, and she looked away quickly, her hands trembling. The following days were filled with pressure from the outside world. Business partners questioned Armin's judgment. Zara's family spread rumors, accusing him of being manipulated by a maid. Invitations to elite parties stopped arriving. The billionaire who once stood admired by all now found doors closing. Yet, strangely, he felt lighter. He spent his evenings in his mother's room, sometimes listening to Miriam sing soft lullabies from her village, sometimes reading old books to her. He discovered that peace was not in glittering halls or contracts, but in the quiet moments of truth. One evening, after a long day, Armin found Miriam sitting by the garden, her eyes lifted to the sky. The moonlight touched her face, making her look both fragile and strong at once. "Do you regret staying here?" he asked gently. Miriam shook her head. "No, sir. I regret nothing. Madam needs me, and that is enough." Armin studied her in silence. He had once thought power came from wealth, but now he saw it came from hearts like hers, steady, giving, unbroken by storms. He realized then that his life was no longer the same. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: he could never return to the world of empty alliances and cold luxuries. Something deeper had taken root inside him. And though neither of them spoke it aloud, both felt it quietly. The bond that had begun in care was slowly growing into something far greater. The storm around Armin's life did not end quickly. Days turned into weeks, and still, the whispers in society grew louder. Business partners who once praised him now looked at him with doubt. Some called him reckless, others pitied him. Invitations from high circles stopped, and meetings felt colder than before. But none of it shook him as much as his mother's weakening health. Mrs. Sophia's breaths grew shorter, and her nights were filled with long silences. Miriam was always by her side, holding her hand, reading to her, or singing softly to keep her calm. Armin often watched them from the doorway. Every time, he felt both pain and gratitude. Pain because he feared losing his mother, and gratitude because Miriam made those final days bearable. One evening, Mrs. Sophia asked them both to sit beside her. Her voice was faint, but her words carried strength. "Life has shown me many faces," she whispered. "I once thought power and wealth could protect us from everything. But I was wrong. Love, loyalty, and kindness are the only treasures that matter in the end." Her gaze moved to Armin. "Son, I know the world speaks against you. I know your choices have cost you friends and status. But if you stay true to your heart, you will never regret it." Armin held her hand tightly. "Mother, I only want your peace." Then she turned her eyes to Miriam. "Child, I never saw you as a servant. You became my daughter the day you stayed awake by my side when even my own blood ignored me. No matter what others say, I know your heart. And I want you to promise me one thing: do not run away from happiness if it comes to you." Miriam's eyes filled with tears. She lowered her head. "Madam, I am not worthy of such words." Mrs. Sophia smiled faintly. "You are more worthy than anyone I have ever met." That night was her last. She left the world quietly, with Miriam's hand in hers and Armin sitting on the other side of the bed. The silence that followed was heavy, and the mansion seemed colder without her presence. For days, Armin did not speak much. He arranged a simple funeral, ignoring the media outside the gates. Many expected him to host a grand ceremony, but he refused. She wanted peace, he said simply, and the family home remained private. Miriam, though heartbroken, continued her duties quietly. She cooked for the house, cleaned, and prayed in her own way for Madame's soul. But she also worried for Armin. She saw the weight he carried, the grief of losing his mother and the burden of fighting the world alone. One evening, Armin found Miriam in the kitchen, preparing tea. He stood there for a while, watching her hands move gently, before finally speaking. "You stayed when no one else did," he said softly. "Even now, when the world blames you, you remain here." Miriam looked down. "I stay because this house needs me. And because she trusted me." Armin stepped closer. "No, Miriam. You stay because your heart is pure. And I cannot imagine this house without you anymore." Her hands froze. She turned slowly, her eyes wide with surprise. "Sir," he shook his head. "No titles. Not tonight. Just hear me as a man, not as your employer. I once thought my life was complete with wealth and respect. But all of that meant nothing when my mother fell sick. The only thing that gave me strength was you. And now I know the truth. I don't want a life where you are only a maid. I want you as my partner." Miriam's breath caught in her throat. "The world will never accept this." Armin's voice was steady. "Then let the world refuse. I don't need them. I need you." Tears filled her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but fear lingered in her heart. Yet when she remembered Madame's last words, "Do not run away from happiness," she felt a warmth spread through her chest. Slowly, she nodded. "If this is truly your heart, then I will not run." For the first time in weeks, Armin smiled. It was not the proud smile of a billionaire, but the gentle smile of a man who had found peace. In the months that followed, their lives did not become easier. Rumors spread again, and society continued to judge. But Armin stood firm, never hiding Miriam, never denying her place by his side. And Miriam, with her quiet strength, helped him rebuild his spirit. Together, they turned the mansion into a place of warmth once more. Armin invested in charities for the poor, honoring his mother's memory, while Miriam opened small programs to help women like her, giving them dignity and work. The world that once mocked them slowly began to soften. Some still whispered, but others saw the truth that love was not about status, but about sacrifice and loyalty. And so, what began as a bond of duty between a maid and a sick woman grew into a love that defied pride, wealth, and fear. Armin and Miriam stood hand in hand at the garden one evening, the same place where doubts once filled their hearts. Now, the silence between them was peaceful. The stars above seemed brighter, and the mansion, though quieter without Mrs. Sophia, felt alive again. Armin whispered, "This is only the beginning." And Miriam, with a gentle smile, replied, "Yes. A new beginning."